I apologise for that interruption earlier. Where we last left off was how to select and deselect an object. For those who've, just to recap on that, it's A to deselect all objects in this software, and A to select all objects. With deselect, and you use the right mouse button to select the cube. Then the next part we are going to look at now is what do these arrows mean. These arrows signify axis and what way the axis go. If I left click on this red arrow here and drag, you can see that I am moving the cube on the x-axis, which is the red line right here. You can also tell which axis you are going on because down in the bottom right corner here you have your axis. You got your X, Y and Z. Obviously the green arrow moves your cube on the Y axis, and your Z arrow, the blue arrow, goes up and down. You can do a lot more with this object than just moving it. And the moving is actually known as the translation tool. You also have your rotation and your scale. To rotate an object, it's not this yellow, it's not this white circle here. If I click on that white circle, it just drags it based on my perspective view. Instead, we go down to this section here, these three tabs. The first one is your translation. Second one, if you left click on that, is your rotation. And obviously, just like the arrows, you click on the axis for rotation. And you have this line here for scaling, where you can scale it like so. And like so. For each one, this circle represents the universal motion. And when I say universal motion, I mean how things move. Example with the scale, dragging inside that right circle is the universal scale tool. Just like if I use it in here, I can rotate like so, based on the circle. So that is how you translate, rotate, and scale your objects. If you have moved around and played around with your cube and you got in certain areas, if you want to bring it back to the center of the grid and set it back to its normal standards, there are many ways you can do this in Blender. First, you could do is go and click on this tab here, and it opens up your object section, which tells you what you have done with your object, especially in this transform tab here. You also can change the name of your object. For the circumstances, we are going to name this base box, and we are going to reset its position by selecting each one of these, starting with location or your translation or move tool, depending on what you want to call it, depending on what software you use, or if you are new to the programs or 3D in general. You can select in all software, Autodesk included, has its location or translation, rotation and scales, and you can set them based on numbers. So we're going to bring this back to the middle, and we're just going to make it back as its standard cube. So every single one of these are to be 0. Now the cube is dead in the middle, but it's not in the right rotation. So we've got to change its rotations back to 0 by clicking on each one. Now for the scale, instead of selecting these tabs here and making it as zeros, each one has to be a 1. And the reason for this tab to be 1 is because it takes us back to its standard base. If I select the Z axis or C axis, depending on where you are in the world, and North Americans say C, Britain say Z. I'm not sure what it is with other countries. I will have to look that up one day, but for media related, it's Z for UK standards. But if I select this Z axis and turn it to 0 and press enter, you can see the cube is now flat. And you do not want to do that with a cube, otherwise you'll have all its faces all messed up and it can cause problems when it comes to rendering and texturing and many other things. So now our cube is all back in the middle, we are going to animate this cube. So if you're still on your rotation tool, you can click back on your translation by going back down here and click on this arrow, and now you've got your arrows back. So we are going to animate this cube to move on the x-axis from right to left. To start this, there are many ways to animate an object. You could start by clicking on this button here, which recalls keyframes automatically based on how you move it. I will show you how that works. If I click on it and I move the cube here, I have moved the cube, and as you noted if we were in this object tab, you can see these have lit up. They lit up because that is the current keyframe. If I go down to my timeline here, I'll just move my bar to like 10 frames per second or 10 frames, you can see there is now a yellow line. And why is there a yellow line? That means that there is a keyframe. And these have, because I've moved my timeline, you can see these tabs here are now green. And that means that it's waiting for a keyframe. So if I am going to put this to 25 frames per second, which is UK standard frame rate animation for films and TV. And I move this over to here. What you see now is this animation from right to left. So if I click on play, you can see it moves. But I don't want to use this automatic keyframe, so we're going to turn these off. I should have actually deleted the keyframes first before turning it off. But what we can do is just press Ctrl Z for each one. And there. So we're going to animate this cube from right to left and bring it back to the right. To do this, I like to use numbers more than just using the arrows. The reason I use numbers or maths is so I can get a more accurate positioning. So what we're going to do is focus on the x-axis, and the x-axis is obviously the top one. So what we're going to do is we are going to click on this location. Now, before I type in the number you need to get to this section here, you could either count these sections. Each one represents its position. This is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Because that's the 8th one, we are going to press 8 and press enter. As you can see, the cube is now moved on the edge of that grid in a positive direction. If you want to animate this object in this position, you can either right click on that tab and press insert keyframes, and now it's been keyframed. Another way you could do this by using the hotkey, you could press I and select location. Now we're going to have to go on our timeline again and slide our line, or this frame, move to frame 25, and we are going to animate the cube moving from this section to that section, and then we're going to move it back. You could drag it again, but it wouldn't be accurate when you play back. So what I'm going to do instead is I'm going to click back on this location, keep that number, but I am going to put a minus at the beginning, and then we're going to press enter. As you can see, we are now on the other side. Also note that I still have my automatic keyframe on, so we can turn that off. That does come in handy at times, your automatic keyframe. But be careful when you are moving things around whilst you got that turned on, because it will consider it as an animation and it will put a keyframe when you move things. So just bear in mind, if you have your automatic keyframe on, you can keep it on if you wish. I generally always keep it off for more stable and more accurate animations. But now we're going to move our timeline from 25 to 50, and from that we're going to click back on our location, and we are going to get rid of the minus, and we're going to press enter, and then we're going to right click, or you can press the I key and click on insert keyframes. If you press the I key, it is location. Now that we got our animation set up, we can come down to our timeline. Select this box here where it says end. That means that's when the frame ends, or the animation ends. Reason we're going to change this is so we can have a loop. To make it loop, you got to end the frame or the animation on that last frame you animated for a loop. So we're going to change from 250 to 50. Now we're going to click on this button here to go back to the beginning, and then we are going to click on the play button. As you can see, we have a looping animation. So to recap on this tutorial, the middle mouse button is your rotation of your scene. The left shift key and the middle mouse button is the panning. The scroll wheel is to zoom out and in, or you can hold down the left control and use the middle mouse button to go in and out. To use the translation, rotation and scales, you go down to this tab here, where you've got your translation tool, your rotation, and your scale. The hotkeys for these, for the translation or movement, I like to call it grab, as that's pretty much what the key is. The G key allows you to grab the object and move it. You can also press G and X, so you can move it on the X axis. And if you want to be really fancy, you can press G, X, and you can press one of the numbers, like 2, and you can move it. If you want to keep it as that, just click the left mouse button. Otherwise, if you don't want it to move, press the right mouse button and it will bring it back to its last position. The R key is for rotation. Just like with the translation, you can use the R key for rotation. Press the X key to rotate on its axis. And you can also put in a digit as well to show how many degrees it rotates in. And you can press the S key for scaling. And just like the rotation and translation, you can scale it based on your axis. And we also covered animation, which is the I key for inserting keyframes. Hold down the left mouse button to drag your current frame along the lines on your timeline, or if you are inserting keyframes, you can come up to this tab here and you can right click. Depending on the kind of object you are animating and how you want it animated, depends on how you actually animate it. For most of the time, for more complex models like a character, you won't be focusing on this tab here. And that will conclude today's tutorial. What we have covered in this tutorial was your navigation around the scene, basic navigation, and basic animation of your cube, and how to select the cube and move the cube, rotate the cube, scale the cube, and select other objects by clicking the right mouse button. And I'll see you in the next video. This is Lucas No from Aesthetics Interaction Studios. Thank you for watching.